Hello everyone, I'm Garrett Gerver. I want everyone for just a few seconds to close your eyes. Just keep them shut, and I want everyone to think about what it would be like to only see that for forever. I want everyone to open your eyes. I understand disabilities vary in severity, and even blindness isn't necessarily the equivalent of closing our eyes. But it's the closest we can get to imagining what it would be like to be impaired in some way and to have that really impact your life. Today I want to talk to you about how there's a lot of things such as internet access, even more trivial things like banking, that we don't think of as inconvenient or even impossible for these people, for people with disabilities. And I want to highlight these for you to make everyone more aware and talk about what people in the field are doing to bring awareness to these problems. First of all, I want to emphasize again how people with disabilities are less likely to have internet access. There's a study done by Frank S. Lee et al., and it talks about how people with disabled parents, right? So people who have a kid who are disabled, a couple who is, one of them is disabled and they have children, they are 1.79 times more likely to not have internet access in their home. 1.79. That is hugely statistically significant. And even ignoring that, they're 1.4 times less likely to have high-speed internet. So of course, for how digital we are in today's age, that's hugely hindering to their everyday life, let alone imagine their kids, how they have to go to school, they have to do their assignments, they want to learn, right? Learning is very much done online now, how that's made hugely harder. And just by this simple correlation that disabled parents, that is the correlation. Secondly, I want to highlight a study by Brian Wentz et al., and it examined how the legal framework, so there's the American with Disabilities Act, or the ADA as I'll refer to it here, and this is supposed to help disabled people with things like businesses have to have important information in Braille so that blind people can properly interact with whatever place they're at, right? The ADA is vastly misinterpreted or inconsistently interpreted on the internet, and this leads to disabled people having limited access in a lot of different ways. I'm sure you can imagine on websites, right, that don't have sound. This can be limiting if there's no captions, right? They won't be able to follow along. Or if someone is blind, if the video or the website doesn't have an audio or like a reader to read off to them what's going on, that can be hugely limiting, and they're unable to use the website then. And there's a lot of cases like this, like if you have dyslexia, like a lot of websites don't account for that, and there's just certain things that people can't control, but it vastly impacts what they're able to handle in daily life on the internet. And while my focus today is mostly about internet access, I want to talk about another few set of problems that we might think is trivial, just to accentuate how disability access is a huge problem in today's world. So there's other technologies that disabled people struggle with accessing. One of these is just basic treatment and medical care. There's a study done, Friedman et al., and this study shows that 30.8% of people with disabilities get delayed medical treatment care, or they got delayed medical care. And this was during the second year of the COVID pandemic. So this wasn't, like a light year where people didn't need to go to the doctor or get medical care. This was a hugely stressful time for many people, a lot of stuff going around, right? COVID, and how that's a very big deal for their older people and people with physical ailments. 30.8% of those people, or 30.8% of people with disabilities got delayed. That's huge. That's a astonishing number. And then 28.9% of people with disabilities forewent needed care. So they didn't even get, they didn't wait for it, they didn't want it. And like that's just because of the condition they're in. The care is that hard to get that they just don't even bother finishing it out. I want to quickly here go through some more stuff. So Pepra, I believe is how you pronounce that, et al. They have a study that people with disabilities use commercial banks 6.3% less often, and they delve into some other kind of banks, and it's all around 6 to 5% less often for different kind of banks. And then also interesting that people with disabilities use mobile money 53.7% more often. So I inferred this, and it was kind of nebulous reading the study, but usually having to resort to things like Venmo, and while we use those, like most people use those anyway, you know, to have to resort to that as kind of your go-to payment and not having like a bank that you go to or a more standardized form of keeping your money together, that's really stressful, and it's a problem I think more people need to look into that we might not consider. You know, in today's day of age, you know, like you think of some of these things as kind of trivial, kind of, you know, like whatever, that everyone has these things. Well, that's not true, and it's actually statistically huge how varied it is between people without disabilities and people with disabilities, how much access you get here. Finally, I'm running out of time here. What are people doing to help, right? How are we getting these people more integrity in their day of life, less missing out for something that's not their fault, right? So again, the aforementioned articles that I mentioned, all those articles are spreading awareness, right? They could have studied anything, they could have looked into anything to spread awareness to what's going on here with all of these variations and differentials. That's not the right word. The differences, right? And the access between someone without disabilities and someone with disabilities is huge, and it needs to be pointed out, and it needs to be spread more. And so good on the people doing that research. I also want to point out a few quick articles. Jetson et al. Talks about how people with low health literacy, often there's a correlation between not having internet access. And so promoting internet access there would be beneficial. Again, a lot of people with disabilities don't have internet access, and so this conversely could help with their health literacy. It could help them, you know, stay healthy, because again, the internet is not just about posting whatever. I mean, there's information to be learned. It's the modern library, right? So that could be huge. And another article, Glenn Cross et al. Found how social media can be distressing for those with mental disabilities, and talks about different ways that the internet can be made to kind of alleviate the stress and be more accommodating to people that have mental disabilities. So to conclude, the internet, right, is kind of the home for modern discourse. It's, you know, you share your funny cat videos, you learn something like on YouTube, you submit these assignments, you're watching this video right now. Online banking too, but it's not designed for everyone, and it certainly was made with the convenience of just pandering to people without disabilities, and there wasn't the care put in to accommodate all people. And I think this is a huge problem. I mean, seeing all the statistics I laid out today, disabled people are far less likely to have internet access, to have banking, to be able to use a bank for payment, to have high-speed internet. I mean, there's a whole plethora of things we could go into, and I just think it's important to list those and detail those and spread awareness to those. So even though we might take things for granted, I mean, most of us know someone with a disability. My sister actually has autism, high-functioning autism, and so I'm sure many people can relate to a situation like your father was in the army and they have a physical ailment or disability or something along those lines. And we take a lot of things for granted in our everyday life. I mean, some of the things like captions on videos, right? Like most people don't have to even bother thinking about that. But I mean, this is real problems that real people have to deal with. And I think if everyone just took a little bit of time to note down what can be made better in their community, even if it's not just on the internet, right? Just to be more accommodating to these kind of people, that would go a long way. Thank you.